They were recorded.
Someday.
I think I'll use this to make a presentation.
Oh, that's one point. All right, so good evening, everybody. It is 6:34 p.m. This is the town council special meeting, including a public hearing. It's Monday, February 27th, 2023. We're here in the boardroom, so thank you for listening. Public hearing is to establish this, the public hearing portion of the meeting is on proposed ordinances as follows. Item A, to establish an affordable housing committee. We have an exhibit on that. And also item B, an ordinance regarding the sale of lease of family real property. The one order of, do we need to call a roll or a special for the step of meeting? Should we?
You can, you don't have to buy 10. I just would want to say to everyone, the acoustics in this room, for any of you that have seen in this room are really not great. And we've got this great proposal, we're working with it. That panel right there is what we're working with. So just try not to speak amongst yourselves and speak clearly and slowly so that anybody hears anything. Here. Yep. No, but you're good in terms of the.
Yeah, well, we're all here.
I was gonna say, for the purposes of the record, right now, Will body, so we're gonna.
Thank you. All right, so I'll read the, well, we've read the two ordinances to establish an affordable housing committee and an ordinance regarding the sale of lease of town-owned property. The whole purpose of a public hearing is to have the public weigh in on the discussions that we've had regarding these two ordinances to date. So first order of business tonight would be to ask if there's any public comment, if anybody's in the audience that wants to participate and sign in to speak or open and ready. Would anybody in the room want to speak on this, on either one of these ordinances? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anybody online that wants to? Nobody online has their hand raised. Extraordinarily controversial ordinances. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so now the business part of it. We've talked about these ordinances at length. This is the actual meeting where we walk through and they become law. And our last chance to do any kind of amending or discussion. So with that, let's see, let's read through the first one, which has the affordable housing. We've all seen it. We talked about the different sections here. And Tom, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether we want to read through all of this. I think we could. You want to read by section and see if anybody has any questions? Go through it.
I'm happy to do that. Almost everybody in the room has been through this already. So I've ended it.
That's true. We have beat this one up. So
I would like to make just a quick statement about it. Sure. That this concept of affordable housing is one of the daunting challenges of the town, and for really no good reason. New Canaan has been exemplary in leading the way in constructing amazing affordable housing developments in town that were the envy of the state, and somehow it became the pariah because, you know, the state wants us to do more. And in any case, one of the ways that we're trying to work ourselves out of that box, that frustration, is to establish a committee of hopefully the best and the brightest that we have to try to make sure that we can stay on track to do both things. So develop affordable housing and increase the stock, and also to maintain local control. People make fun of local control, but the way we've chosen to do things has worked out brilliantly so far. So why wouldn't you rely on us to make choices about how we're going to continue to do this? So hopefully the people that staff this committee will catch that vision, wrestle with all the amazingly complex detail, and put us in a little better spot than we feel like we're today.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments on the ordinance? Anybody want to weigh in? So, one of the pieces of business that we'll have is we will have to recommend, the member from the council, but we'll do that at a future meeting. The way we've set this up with one member from planning and zoning, one member from the housing authority, one member from town council, one member from board of finance, and then 5 at-large members. We've talked about that as well. I really believe that this particular committee, more than any other committee, is gonna have a really great group that can guide us with input from all those different places, and hopefully, I think if you talk to anybody, what's the biggest issue we're faced with today in New Canaan? This is the one. So I wanna congratulate Tom and Hillary on the great work putting this ordinance together. A lot of people talk about different things and ways to solve affordable housing in New Canaan. The council, with your help, is actually gonna do something about it. So congratulations on this particular ordinance and the importance that this shows both in Canaan and the state as far as what we're doing. So.
And thank you, and great committee that we have, and we wouldn't have done it without your leadership, because this is something that Steve basically said, you're gonna get this done. This isn't negotiable.
Well, and thanking you guys, but also I think that there's 12 of us that have language in here, which is really exciting. Every single person on this council contributed in some way on this ordinance, and that has to feel really good. I mean, every one of you guys had something to do with a change or an amendment or language here, so. You don't get to pat yourself on the back very often, but nice job.
There's one thing though, I think we all received an email from someone today having an issue.
Yeah.
I think there's another positive in this, is it's going to be a very clear demonstration that our representatives up in Hartford can take up there as they are really wrestling with how to make P30G a workable statute. Because it's not achieving the goal as written. So when our representatives up there, representative senators are out there and look at this and say, this is what a community can do in a positive way. So that'll be helpful for them, I think.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is.
But we still one at a time, do we have to vote on it?
Yeah, we do have to vote on it. So, Tucker, do you want to vote? Should you vote now or do you want to move it?
Yeah, I think you should put one that.
All right, so, Tom, why don't you take it and ask for a motion to have a second?
Yeah, we have a motion to adopt the ordinance to establish an affordable housing committee.
Second.
First, Hillary, second.
Deb, second.
Yeah.
No, Hillary second.
Oh, Hillary, oh,
Or
you.
you made the motion.
You made the motion.
Yes.
Oh, I made the motion.
Hillary, second.
Okay.
Tom and Hillary,
All in favor?
and that's unanimous.
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the next one. This is an ordinance regarding the sale or lease of town-owned real property. Less language, and that was purposefully less language. So it's 50-1 approval required. The language is simply no sale or lease of real property owned by the town shall be valid unless approved by the town council. A couple of exceptions there, which we talked about. Would anybody in the room like to talk about this ordinance? Raise your hand. No one. Is there anybody online with their hand raised? No. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, Tom, any comments or?
I might want to acknowledge the fact that we had gotten, all of us have gotten the,
Right,
email
so
today.
for record purposes, we did receive an email today from Jeff Holland regarding CGS 7-163E and some notice requirements. I don't know exactly what the Connecticut General Statute citation he has here says, but there's a proposal to include some additional language. Does anyone look to see what that says?
Public hearing. So we have to.
Well, just a background for structure of what we're proposing to do is that we're aware that, and we've been following that provision of state law because it requires us to have hearings. As a town council, we have to have a hearing when there's a sale of town property. The notable absence or, you know, the hole in that state law is that it doesn't require town council to take any action or give us any authority to act. To say yes or no on the proposal, so we're trying to fill that gap. So this actually mimics the language that Jeff is citing. It's clearly, this is based on that statute. The only legal question that I can think of that he might be raising is, do we have the authority to amend something which the state statute has addressed? And all I can say is Jeff's proposal to cite the statute isn't going to resolve that question one way or the other. That's all he's saying is cite the statute. Well, that doesn't solve it one way or the other. So in any case, Ira Bloom and Nick Bamonte are aware of this, and you know, we'll stop dead in our tracks if our lawyers tell us that this won't work, but they have reviewed this in the past, and they're very much aware that this is intended to exist in tandem with that exact provision.
Statutes usually set the floor, we can add, can't subtract, unless there's a preemption issue. Which I'm not concerned with, I'm just saying a statute can be, you know, preempt the whole area.
Right.
So
And maybe there's a preemption issue, we couldn't think of it, but I'm open to that, but we haven't thought of why that was.
So are we waiting for council to give us an opinion or something, or are we just going on ahead and voting? Which I don't know, I'm just trying to understand. Are we okay with this?
They've reviewed the language.
They have,
So
yeah.
also we can't do this without them. So they've reviewed the language and they're fine. with it.
And the email was forwarded to them.
Well, when you mean they reviewed it, like, I guess my only concern is it can this be challenged? Like in any.
Well, maybe, but not because of that email that we got.
Right.
That isn't gonna change it.
Yeah, I'm not even referring to that. I just mean, like,
Okay.
really strong as this, like, the language might be fine, but like, is there a situation where this can be challenged? And that's,
But the whole reason that you use local ordinances is to define what happens locally.
Yeah.
And to lay down the message from the people, basically, in this case, to say, listen, we want to make sure that nobody in town can sell a piece of property, town property, without the authorization of the town council. Pretty clear. And not every town has a town council. They all have different.
right.
So this is what we're doing in New Canaan, and, you know, we do this kind of ordinance all the time where we're, you know, saying this is what happens here
Yeah.
in 06840.
I think
It's not like we're not subject to the state, but
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like.
we're defining local.
Yeah, just from a legal perspective, I just want to make sure it's not just that, oh, this is fine language, but it can't be challenged, like, is there other?
Anything can be challenged.
Anything can be challenged.
I just want to say that when Nick Lamont was at our Zoom meeting,
Yes,
he mentioned that because the charter did not provide for it, that we could write an ordinance. So at his direction, and we moved to do the ordinance. But just for the record, Darien has an ordinance very similar to this. It's a little more explicit that before any action is taken, it has to first be approved by town council, and then the sale has to be approved by town council. So I just wanted to put it there.
I don't think there are any issues that we haven't considered and asked for legal advice on, so.
Yeah, and I don't think, sorry, I don't think that this, in any way, what's the word I'm looking for, conflicts with the state statute that requires a public hearing. So this would just be complementary to it and supplement it, which is something we're allowed to do. So I can't imagine that it would be challenged on any basis that it's in any way conflicting with state law.
That was,
Yeah, exactly.
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Well, and he's asking that we add that we're complying with general statutes, but I think that's assumed across the board.
that's correct. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, Tom, take it away with motion in a second.
All right, I move the adoption of the bylaws and ordinances of the ordinance for the regarding the sale of or lease of town-owned real property. Do I have a second? Hillary, all in favor?
It's unanimous, thank you very much. And thank you again on the work on this as well. And I actually have to thank Christina, who brought this to our attention. Christina, thank you very much for guiding the light on this particular one, so
Thank you. Good job.
nicely done. All
Yeah,
right.
this next item on three is gonna take literally 2 minutes,
Okay.
rather than going to the audience, we've got Albie sitting in 3 late nights last week, so.
All right, Albie, come on up.
Good evening, all.
Hi.
The next item is our joinder agreement with, am I in a good spot? Is our joinder agreement for our dispatch services. Westport Fire is currently handling our dispatch services. They've combined with Fairfield to make a Fairfield Regional Dispatch Service. This is the legal document that states all that it's gonna happen on or around March 1st, I'll be honest with you. I heard now it might not be March 1st, but Doug Lamonti needs, just said, go with March 1st for that changeover. It doesn't affect us in any way, except for the legal document, who's actually, who we're contracted with at that point in time. So the copy of the joinder agreement, I believe you have.
That needs to be ratified by the county.
And yeah, no money, there's no change in cost, and we're locked in until 2025 with our costs for dispatch services.
And it's been approved by the board, so.
Yes, and we went to board of selectmen last week.
How often do we do this kind of, it seems like we've done this before, so how, is it every 5 years or? How often?
I would say the contract probably hasn't been done since they originally went to Westport in around 2014. Unless there was an increase of any fees, but I don't think there was either. We did the hazmat team's contract a few months ago, because that's going through in a local agreement right now. But this is just, hopefully we won't have to do dispatch services again.
When you've been around a while, it seems like we just did it before.
That's when they switched to Westport from Super. So,
Any questions for Albie? It's pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. All right, so we need a motion and vote on it. Okay. So Mark,
Do I hear a motion to approve?
second. Well, Michael. Any comments, questions? All right, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Albie. Have a great evening. Thanks for coming out.
Okay.
Number 4. Nope, yeah, we can do it. Item number 4, adoption of the audit and financial statements. Approval of the request, consider the recommendation of the audit committee to accept the audited financial statements. And Chuck, will they consider this in the crowd?
Give us a moment for technical.
Yes.
issues.
Bill wants to,
Files.
I don't want my, I put on my desk on the.
What do you put on your desk?
Actually, I see Andrew. Andrew, thanks for coming as well. Appreciate it.
ask Bill.
How about with Bingham's?
I'm sorry, I put it on my desk on. My desk. Want me to? No.
We'll open the file and save it in file. Open the desktop and save it in file.
We're checking.
Steve, it's Bill Fred, I'm on. I'm not sure whether you can hear me or not.
We can answer, Bill. Thank you. We're just trying to pull up the document on Anthony Beaver.
Thank you.
Yeah, Phil wants to start.
Oh, Bill, we're ready. You can start.
Yeah. That's what you want to do tonight.
I can't see the whole room, but it should be Ann and Chuck
Yeah, there
sort of
we
at
are,
the
Bill.
table and
Camera won't work. Hold on.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh, there you
there we
go.
go. Thank you. I think Ann's gonna start.
Yeah, just pull it up on the computer. Just a minute.
And then we're just in a different room, so it's.
There it is. Thank you.
Rita. Good job. I would be like startup.
There it is. Oh, thank you.
Yes. That way. So I'll start out with, thank you for meeting today for the approval of the audit. I'll just touch, it's 3-4 slides, I'll just touch on the main things, so you can see why, because as you know, the financials can be quite complicated. So this is the government-wide position on a full accrual basis. And as you can see, between the 21 and 22, total government net positions, we went from 213 to 202. That's strictly accounting on the bottom line there, that the grants that we gave to the libraries, that becomes, it's not, even though it's bonded, it becomes an expense to us. So this is very, this is full accrual. This is not your normal budgeting accounting. So the main reason we dropped in that net position was because of that grant on the very bottom line. So we go through, we have the government activities, which is, we know all the different funds that we have. The business type is related to the waging pool, and the activities that go through that for a net position.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get those last minutes. So widescreen and.
The next, these are, again, our revenue and expenditures to show that 10 million I was talking about on the bottom right-hand corner. Difference being is that, again, the grant for the library is treated as an expense. There's no offsetting revenue up above. Most of the other differences, there's an offsetting revenue. So our net position changed by that 10 million. This is our long-term debt. This year, we just had some new GASB rules on it. So the long-term debt changed because we went out for bonding in December of 21, about $20+ million, plus the debt that came off for the year. So the net effect of that was the increase going from the 99 million to the 113. Plus we had some new lease GASB rules. I'm getting too much in the weeds. So that was a new, you'll see that on the third line there where it says leases payable. That's a new GASB rule we had to institute for fiscal year 22. So that's why our net debt went up, because of the increase in debt, what came off, and the leases that joined.
What came off?
So our annual debt, we're at about 17 million that we pay a year. So it's the debt that came off, that the principal that we pay each year that comes off.
That's 17 million principal.
And plus interest, principal and interest is 17 million.
So that's mainly interest probably, right?
It depends on the,
Long-term financing, the principal's on the back end.
right, but it depends on the, on how, which bonding is still open. So you'll have some that will have the interest up front, you'll have some that is coming off, so I forget which one is about to come off, and that's why we have a cliff coming up.
Is there a schedule for that?
There is, yes, and that'll come out in the, in our budgeting process as we go through. You're gonna see the schedule of how, what the cliffs are, what we call the cliffs, what debt is going on.
The cap set.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, can you just go back one page?
sure.
So in 20, so we changing that position was up 14 million this year, and now we're dead. So that's a swing of not just 10, but it's a swing
If we go through all the total swing is about 25
of
million.
25 million, yeah.
You'll see in different lines here, and I don't want to get too much into weeds, like, let's just take education. We know that education doesn't have a budget of $117 million. That includes your pension payment that belongs at the state, the OPEB liability that's at the state. The swing in pension in itself between what the pension fund expense was last year versus this year. So there's a bigger swing, but you'll see what happens though, there's an offset on the top. With most of these things, without getting too into the weeds on it, you'd have to know all the details on, there's an offset for most of these items because we do smoothing in the pension. There's all these different offsets from a revenue perspective up on top that offset the expenses in the, and below. So the 10 million is for the year, but the 25 is the year over year. You would go through and go, like I said, the pension, the teachers, OPEB, the teachers pension itself, pension expense. I'm trying to think of a couple of the other ones. Small internal service fund. There's all these little types of changes because of the fact that this is a full accrual accounting, not our budgetary rate.
You can't monetize and you can't manage these numbers because there's so much detail that's to it.
Exactly.
So like they say, hey, go back a slide and say, let's look at this. There's so much more detail that's in every single line item that That's why I asked for schedules, because the schedules would speak to exactly what's rolling off, coming on. And also there's manageability that you have control over some of those expenses and
Yeah,
moving.
smoothing on, yes, exactly, when it's in the pension fund, because like I said, in our actual book, there are three methods of accounting. There's our budgetary, there's modified accrual, and then there's full accrual. This is full accrual. And we have to show those three different types of levels in financials. We work mainly in the budgetary basis on a regular basis, but for the financials, we have to add in all these numbers. Like I said, the teacher pensions of the state, but we have to add it in here, and it gets put in as a revenue up above as an offset. Because it's from the state.
And if I may, you mentioned a $10 million grant to the library, and is that the loan?
No, that's the one that went out, when we bonded in 21.
Okay,
There was a 10 million grant, not a loan, not the loan that's coming up
Okay.
now. That's a grant, and when it's a grant, it's considered an expenditure to the town, even though we bond it and the bond will hit our budgetary basis each year.
Yeah.
On this basis, you're gonna hit the full 10 million.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this one? So that was a long-term debt, and then our favorite one is our fund balance. So the general fund up here is broken down between the assigned and the unassigned. So we have about 20, nearly 20, just under 29 million in the general fund, which is what will be coming up during the budget process. In these numbers, I'm probably getting too far. So it's about $29 million. All the other governmental funds are all these other funds we have. The small bonded projects are special projects, tax supported capital. We probably have 10 or so at the very back of the book of all the different, and it's also the Board of Ed, all their special funds that they have, their activity funds, they all go into that governmental. Then we have what's called proprietary funds. We have two types, enterprise fund and a internal service funds. So the enterprise fund is considered this waving pool. This is their fund balance at the end of the year. We have the health for the town, the internal service fund for the town, fund balance at 1.5, and we have the Board of Ed's 2.4. So as a government wide, we've just, under 60 million on fund balance. And that's a very high level overview of where we are with it. As I said, there's types of reporting for the, so it gets, what number goes into which book it is, it gets a little bit confusing.
Can you make the face and can you go to the double square? Bill's gonna want to build yeah, the double one is fine. Double. Yeah. And it's hard where you're sitting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That one. That one. There you go, Bill.
Okay, there's.
All right, Bill, you're up.
Much. So could we go to the next slide? Great. So the committee had we had 5 formal meetings during the year. Lots of work outside the meetings, reading the report and so on. As Ann mentioned, there's been, the report includes, so to speak, GASB 87 change on leases. For our town, that really wasn't a big issue. Relatively small number of leases. And then we have a very complete MD&A. We had a fixed asset conversion and a whole lot of stuff about the COVID-19 impacts. But the bottom line is we have a clean opinion from PKF. The audit committee has been through this in great detail. We are also supporting the issuance of these financial statements. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So the audit committee would recommend that that the town council approve the financial statements. In terms of opportunities for next year, I think the closing cycle, this was a difficult year because of staffing and COVID and so on. But we're hoping to get back onto the schedule we've been on in the most recent 5 years, sort of a November, December timeframe. I think more work to be done in terms of the MD&A, which is the management discussion and analysis, which is really a good explanation of the financial statements. We've always talked about shared services. I still think there's some opportunities there as well. One thing I think Ann and I were talking about, along with Chuck, was maybe, and the rest of the audit committee, offering to Steve, to the town council, maybe sort of a workshop before this session. So any of the town council members who want to sort of better understand the financial statements, make it a little bit easier for them. And then also do some comparisons to what these numbers look like. You would look at it from a corporate world set of accounting rather than a government set of accounting. And then there's a big thank you goes out to a lot of people. There's a lot of work here. There's a lot of pages in this report. The ones you see on the slide, certainly for sure, as well as some of the names that are not on here. Diane and Cheryl and Andrew, our treasurer, who has spent a lot of time on the report as well. Earlier, we saw the list of members of the audit committee. Besides myself, it's Rob Fryer, Chuck Jacobson, who's in the room. Chuck's been a longstanding member, does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Ed Kangas and George Moranis. Of course, George, you all know, and George will be rotating off the committee really at the end of the cycle, which is pretty much now. So Steve, bottom line is we recommend the financials be, they've been being presented to the town council by the audit committee, and recommend that the town council will approve those. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Questions from the council?
Isn't it nice in the past years, it hasn't been so.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look up there, the third year budget award, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
Could you speak to that for a minute? What is, you've been doing this for a while. What does a 3-year in a row budget award represent?
Well, I think that, it's really an excellent, an award in terms of the quality of the material that's put together, compared to the other towns. The quality, I think, of the management discussion and analysis, and the quality and depth of the disclosure. If you were to look at, I haven't done this, but I would bet a nickel, maybe even 2 nickels, that our MD&A is best in class. I would say the disclosure on the Board of Education is, probably better than most, if not all. Those are 2 areas that really jump out. Having said that, I think that there's a number of areas that we can improve, and that's sort of on our agenda for this coming year. I know that Kevin and Ann fully embrace that, as well as the committee.
What areas do you hope to improve on? And also, when do we expect the schedules that support, we're asking for approval or support of what's being presented? The schedules that support some of those high level numbers, which look excellent and be very good to get the full detail into those figures.
Well, that's a question for Ann.
Well, outside of the actual report itself, would you want additional, they're in the basis of the report. So if there's places that you want, if we did that workshop to tell you where to find those reports.
Sure,
Yeah.
they have to attend that workshop.
The report is 150 pages.
Yeah, that's like,
A lot of stuff.
The light list for me.
Well, that's one of the reasons why if the audit committee was developed for that very reason, and you hit on the head, Chuck, there's 150 pages of numbers that we were presented with to go through on top of all the other things that we were doing. And that's why the audit committee was formed, because it's a lot of work, and give these guys a lot of credit for what they do to support us, because ultimately it's our responsibility. But all the work gets done by this committee. It's really a load on the council to have that. So we can't thank you guys enough.
Yeah, I'll just say that most of the work comes through Ann's group, and we then take a close look at it.
But having that extra set of eyes, the
Yes.
talent that committee represents, we're pretty lucky as a town to be able to put that kind of talent in one place. So thank you, man.
Having to support it.
Just have one question. It seems like everything's pretty straightforward. Were there any surprises that you saw, or anything that? jumped out?
Maybe I would ask Chuck if, number one, I can't quite hear all the questions, but I think the last one was on surprises. Chuck, anything that jumps out at you?
I don't think so. I think the biggest challenge was the timing. You know, and the challenges that I think Bill or Ann mentioned with the, staffing changes this past year, as well as the continued COVID issues with auditing. And all that. But I don't think there were really huge surprises from the point of view of something popped up that wasn't expected.
Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, well, on the staffing issue, do you feel as though you have enough and you fill those holes that you have, or is there more room for improvement in terms of bodies to help get you through that?
It was having the turnover of so much of staff and losing the history and knowledge of how things were done. So it's really getting into the weeds and saying, okay, this is how it's done, and then training the people to do it. So, if we didn't lose as many, it might not have been as difficult, but to have that level turnover, that's what it is. I feel I have a really good group now, and we're moving ahead with a lot of the changes and with other departments that we're looking to, they're changing their processes and so we don't have silos per se. We have uploads files instead of manual work. That's all coming down the road the next year as well. So it's gonna have a massive impact in taking away the manual process from us.
Right.
Again, why did so many people leave?
So before me, there was the comptroller left, not sure why. Then the CFO went to Normal. We had the senior accountant retire. He was in retirement age and he had said he was retiring anyway. And then we had, another staff member who went to Normal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really tough. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Well, that's
We've
like
got a
the
great-
fire department. Ann pulls up to the fire and the fire's burning, and in the meantime, she looks around and the entire department left.
But I've got great staff, great support all throughout,
For you to be able to recover so quickly, so it's key personnel leaving, that not was directly affected by you or anything else, just that's natural progression. For you to be able to recover so quickly is very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm interested to know what Bill's reference was to potential shared services, since we are approaching budget season. So Bill, can you shed some more light on that statement you made earlier?
Would you just repeat that question?
Or you said earlier in your testimony, earlier in your presentation.
Another work.
Let's go.
Earlier in your presentation, mentioned something about there may be some potential shared services that you have identified or at least considering or thinking about. Can you shed a little more light on that statement and give us a little more color?
Well, I mean, I think it's been in our presentation every time we've come to the town council, which is, as Steve said, quite a number of years now. And it's really the separation of the Board of Ed and the town. And, not necessarily every single area. Some of those, of course, by law have to be separate, but there are some things that we could do together to save money. And I think that's been talked about a fair amount over the years. But at the end of the day, it's nothing that Ann can do herself or nothing that the audit committee can do itself. It's something that the bodies that supervise the town, the first selectman and superintendent and others would have to work together on. But some of those are non-intrusive, but for one example, might be cybersecurity. We had a cybersecurity presentation at the audit committee. It was an executive session, but the Board of Ed has its own cyber approach. And, I've been around long enough to know that you could get one person to do it for both the Board of Ed and the town. And, it could be the Board of Ed doing it for the town. It could be the town doing it for the Board of Ed, but that would be an area where you could save money. I mean, with technology today, if you're spending the same amount of money today doing things that you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you're probably wasting money. I mean, that doesn't mean that your expenditures would go down in total because some new things would come along, but technology really allows us to reduce, a lot. Earlier, you had a presentation on fire response and EMS response, and some of the new technology that's coming into that space is something, that, as an example, away from the accounting system, the town and Fairfield County should be looking at because it's better, bigger, and cheaper. say same thing in the audit space and the accounting space. There's things we could do. I mean, one example would be, this is not a criticism of Van, because most towns do this, but most entities, any of you have your own small business, you close your books in generally 3 months or 2 months. You got to get your tax return filed. You know, we take 6 months. And, you know, again, it's a lot of the towns in Fairfield County, it's the way they do it in government, not a criticism of Van or a criticism of New Canaan. But when you stretch something out over 6 months, opposed to 3 months or 2 months, it costs you more money. And you all know that. So there's things we could do if there was the commitment to it.
Thank you.
One thing to add, in terms of cost, the way I kind of look at it is it's lost opportunity to work on other things.
Exactly.
So time that's spent just pulling numbers together, and things like that, over a long period of time. That takes away potentially from other things. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and the idea of the shared services, as Bill said, I think, you know, initially, we talked about many different initiatives in town between the Board of Ed and the town. And Brian's done a great job on the Board of Ed side during budget season. As we've asked that year after year, he's actually included a lot of those ideas and a lot of the initiatives in this presentation. So, you know, the Board of Ed has done things over the years with the town to combine and share services. We've never gotten to the point where we've had one controller or one, you know, central person. We've talked about combining that position, but we've never gotten to that point. So that would be one big saving that we've talked about over the years, but we just haven't gotten there yet. So, you know, obviously there is room for improvement. There always is, and that's our job to keep looking. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to be clear that, you know, I wasn't talking about any lack of cooperation on some of the things we're doing. Quite to the contrary, you know, the Board of Ed and the town work together very, very well in a number of areas. But as always, there's future opportunities.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, the accounting system that you use, the technology, what is that called? Is that
Munis.
Munis? Is that the same as the Board of Ed, or is that?
It is, we're on different, we're on different,
Different platforms?
well, we're a different platform,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
different,
Same,
different,
they're on a different EIN number than us, so.
same software, different instances, right?
Do it.
Different instances of the same software, is that right?
Different platform,
Different platforms.
same, we can't see each other, they're not tied together.
Do
So
we pay one fee for that Munis? or
Each
do you
pay-
pay
we pay-
separate fees?
Two separate fees, two separate reporting.
So that seems like a good opportunity to combine, they can keep separate, but you buy one contract, right? Is that a big savings, Chuck?
I think
It's a subscription.
I mean, those are the kind of things it's very hard
Yeah,
to know without
right,
investigating.
Yeah,
And just saying there could be some opportunities to just explore,
right,
you know, you put down on a piece of paper, here's possibilities, and then get together and
and research it.
figure out if
Yeah,
it has any potential. I
right.
believe there was some work done X number of years ago, by some outside, maybe Blue Hero, I'm not sure. Way before.
Like you said, there's always opportunity for charity.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, and I don't know what the other towns do, but does Wilton have, do they have visibility into the Board of Ed on that side?
They do because it was a shared CFO, I was the shared CFO,
Got it.
so, and they're both on the same system, same payroll in-house. Different procedures,
Mhm.
so, but only, I was the only one that could see both sides.
Got it.
Because it was still,
I think, and if I'm not mistaken, you were the CFO for the town and the Board of Ed, right? But, you know, that's not what I would call combining things, because fundamentally what they did is they gave Ann 2 jobs. And, you know, and that doesn't really combine things. But, you know, it's not just in the Board of Ed, it's in a number of other areas in the town. Every time you do something separate. So it could be something the town could really look at one day, but Steve, we could come back at a later date and share some thoughts with the committee if you wanted, or you and I can just talk one-on-one as a starter.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. And just to follow up on the expectations for next year, and obviously, Daniel, I'll let you take the floor on this, but the normal time to report is, you think, November, December, when would we expect?
That is typically the normal process, and we are trying to make it shorter. The normal process is, from a statutory basis, the Board of Ed keeps their books open for 2 months. So August, July and August, their books stay open. Because they have payroll through those, their year is separate to our calendar year or fiscal year. So we have to wait those 2 months till they close their book. Then we have to take them into our books. And then you start doing all your year-end closings, and then you have to fit into the auditor schedule because they've got so many other clients. So they'll come out and do the prelim in June maybe, and then you've got to get on their schedule, usually September, October, November, so that they do their main audit to then wrap everything. So, we do, obviously, I'd love to get it all sooner than later, but that's our goal.
Thank you. Are we happy still with the firm? And any feedback from you guys, or is anybody, Chuck, Bill, and how do you, where are we with the firm? Are we happy? Performing okay?
With that, with PKF?
Yeah.
Was that the question, Steve?
Yes,
Yes.
Steve, were you asking about PKF?
yes, I am.
Yeah, I think we've, number of years that we have had that firm, they've done a good job for us. I think it's standard practice for us to consider whether we should rotate that. I think rotate them. I think we will be considering that. But they also promoted a manager who, a young lady who, could be, potentially the partner going forward. So, in cooperation with First Selectman and Ann and the rest of the committee, I think we will think about the approach and maybe either think about modifying or moving the partner off and getting another partner from PKF to make sure that we continue the independent, or go to a new firm, and also think about bidding it as well. So that's something that's work in progress, but we are happy with their work for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, we talked about institutional knowledge and how important that is. And when you
That's-
switch firms, it's a big hill to climb, so.
Yeah.
It's the downside that but the other side of it is if you get too comfortable, that's not good either, so.
We don't let them get too comfortable.
And they were for me, they were very instrumental this year with the history and the knowledge, on what it was.
Any other questions for the council?
I have one, and I know we're gonna address this in the budget, but on page 4, where you have both the town and the Board of Ed Health Internal Services Fund.
Correct.
Is the town, maybe I should know this, is the town self-insured as well?
It
As
is.
a board, it's just interesting to see them compared side by side, because the town fund goes up, the Board of Ed goes down, so I don't know, are there more claims
Well, there
or?
was a lot of things to know that in that particular year, because of the level of their fund balance, they drew down from a budgetary basis and did not use, so say if their budget should have been 10 million. They maybe made it 8, actually it was 8, it was probably higher, but it was 8.9, I think, in that year, because they used the fund balance to draw down that, so as not to put it.
So is
into-
that more, a more appropriate, like, ratio of, 1.5, and there's 179 town employees to 2.4 for 700 and something Board of Ed employees? I'm just
Well, the Board of
curious.
Ed has a policy, so the Board of Ed has to keep 40% of their there's a corridor that works out based on their claims, a 20% corridor. Of that corridor, they have to keep 40% in the fund. And then they have an IBNR, incurred but not reported number that also needs to be kept in the fund. Both the town and the Board of Ed has to do that. We don't have the corridor, but we have the IBNR. And then the town itself in the general fund has to keep the 60% in the fund balance. So we do have a policy that requires certain dollar amounts for the Board of Ed.
Yeah. It's complicated.
It is.
I feel like that gets explained all of it. It's like so many.
So it's not a ratio, sorry to answer your question, it's not really. a ratio.
Yeah. It's like- Yeah. And is it proportional, but I mean, I guess there's a formula in the back.
Any other questions? All right, I have Andrew here. Andrew, we don't get to hear from you that often, so just two words. Come on up here and just give us your thoughts on the audit. Maybe words.
That's yours.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been reviewing, all the work really over the last 2 weeks. You know, the 150-page report, so I was brought in, when the audit committee started reviewing it. And really focused on my area, which is really the investment side of things. You know, the one thing I'll point out is, when you're looking at it from a budgetary standpoint, they actually look at the value of the portfolio as of June 30, 2022, right? And it's a snapshot in time. But the thing is, with the portfolio that I manage, we never sell securities for a gain or a loss. We hold them to maturity, so we get our entire principal investment back. That way you guarantee you'll never lose money. You just get the interest and dividends, and then you get your whole principal when the bond matures. So that's why this year, with interest rates going way up as quickly as they did at the end of the last fiscal year, it caused the value of the portfolio to technically decline, unrealized loss. But again, as those bonds mature, we're getting all that principal back and able to reinvest it in higher interest bonds to increase our revenue. So we should see in this fiscal year, and I know in this budget process, when you get the budget, you'll see that's a much higher number that we're expecting, you know, in fiscal 24. But I look forward to working with Ann and others, you know, as some of the different improvements that Bill was talking about get implemented over the next year, and, you know, getting involved in the process even earlier, you know, to help be part of the, you know, the team. So, thank you.
Well, it takes a team to get this done, so that's why I wanted to recognize. Yeah, thank you for what you've done as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we need to vote on this. So we need a motion and a second, so we're gonna make a motion to move it. Motion. Martin, second. Christina? All right, so we need a motion to adopt the audited financial statements.
You got motions.
I know, I'm sorry. I didn't read that properly. So we're adopting the audited financial statements. All right, so we have the motion, we have a second, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item. Item number 5.
I'm gonna speak. Okay. I know.
And if we could have you for a second, can you stay for this one?
Sure.
Just something clear on it as we went through it. It's the CapEx process. I think you've had to see it.
We talked a little bit about it this morning.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear what you were talking on this. We talked about item 5 years capital expenditures, the CapEx process. We're just discussing the spreadsheet that Rita's put together. And so far, what we've agreed to do is sort of demo this idea as we go into this budget season to try to. It's more or less to rank in different categories the strength of certain capital expenditure, and it's a tool that we're looking at least at the council level, to try to get a better sense of where these the weight of some of these capital expenditures would lie. So I'll let Rita, why don't you?
Yeah, and I would imagine, and you may have seen, it's a red, yellow, green. Yeah, chart, right? So it's, you're basically identifying what projects you feel are gonna be more of a green lighted, what maybe has red flags and kind of it's in the middle, right? And the first step is really identifying what criteria, like what are the questions we're asking to even evaluate these different projects. So that's, does everyone have a copy? I emailed everyone.
I know Tiger's on the.
I do have some, I don't, if you guys can, I have 10 copies if we can just share it. And you're trying to. So, you know, rather than just, sometimes we talk about these things, it's very like, not that you don't think about the right things, but it's not, there's not a process. And it's more, it's not maybe consistent every time we consider a different project. So this is a way to like, it's more process, more rigor into how we're evaluating. So I just listed, again, this is, I took some of the inputs that you guys gave me from the last meeting, and I hope I incorporated that. But if I'm missing anything, Oh, thanks. Definitely want your, your feedback, but the idea first is all of us to align on what criteria we should be evaluating these FX projects on. So, do I need to go through all of them? Yeah, right. So, I guess the next step is, what do you think about the criteria? Are we asking the right questions? Are we missing anything? Do we want to change anything?
Tiger is on.
Oh, does he need?
No, I'm sending it to right now. If it's some concerns. That about work. Good to bring up.
Hi, Tiger.
Maybe Rita, you want to share your screen? Do you have it? No, okay, let me see. I'll just find it.
So yeah, I guess one of the concerns is if we're using at the council level, should this be a council tool or should it be more of, or finance or, further out, including department heads, et cetera, but this is, I think at this point, we've got to keep it to the council level if we can do this.
Maybe we could try it and then if it works, understand it, because in my opinion, I think that makes sense, because if we're looking at the same things from start to finish, it does make sense.
Yeah,
So. I don't know, how do I?
Yeah, it's hard on my camera. It is on its own. I don't know. What is DPID? That's supposed to be DPW.
Honestly, I took it straight off of, Christina, maybe it's DPW, it probably is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was the other part of this, we wanted to put categories, so, you would just add a column of which department we're talking about, so I parks, DPW, VOE, municipal, EMS, emergency services, and utilities, so we may want to end up with covering all the categories we should be, but.
Would we combine the last review?
Tigers, Tiger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here, sorry.
Tiger, you remember looking at this spreadsheet, you remember that you did come back with a concern, was it? Ranking them or budgeting books, the major concern, yeah.
Well, I just think it should be a council tool, to be honest with you. Most of the information is available in the budget book or elsewhere. Most of the criteria that you have. I mean, if you want to use it as a council tool, it's fine. I think that expanding it to a larger level might be problematic.
Yeah, I think initially that's what we're talking about doing is, a demo this year at the council tool and then, see how it goes. And if it turns out it's a useful tool and we think it's,
Yeah. And I also think it's great, it's very true, but I also think it is, to set that expectation for people who are bringing forward these projects to be able to present that. I think of the Powerhouse Theater, for instance, that presentation. And, I remember, talking with Patricia and saying, oh, you may want to consider adding these things because they're not covered in your presentation. But if you're giving if you're giving criteria to folks up front, they can position their presentation and answer these questions. It's a lot easier, they know what they're being judged on. They may even change how they approach a project and make it more, useful or whatever.
Most of the criteria that you're asking for, we've already analyzed. We don't bring a project forward unless it's vetted through at least through our departments or elsewhere. They're not, we've answered the majority of these questions already in-house prior to it ever making the sheet, the budget sheet.
Right. I think that the only issue with keeping it within, hi Tiger, it's Hillary, you can't see me over here, thank you. I'm hidden in the corner. Is that by the time it gets to us and we're evaluating it here, we could only cut. So we can't, so, if we're saying like, this is how we're gonna judge your project, it would only be in the context of either accepting it whole or cutting. So it probably is a good
criteria maybe for the next year for people to consider when they're starting at the beginning too. And unless it's shared amongst the various groups that have to consider any project. Because for us, it's sort of like, all right, are we gonna approve this or cut based on these criteria? And that's not to say this isn't a help, I think this is a super helpful guideline for us to follow, because you're right, sometimes the discussion is, well, I think it would be great to have a playground in Waveney that my kids could do while my other kid is playing soccer. And instead, we have sort of concrete things to look at to guide our discussion, which I think is really, really helpful. I just, to answer your question, Steve, it might be helpful if it does catch on. I don't know that we can impose it on anyone, but if it did catch on as sort of a thing to think about. So my only specific suggestion or thought is whether we could incorporate increased budget costs within cost benefit analysis, whether those two could be combined so that we have fewer categories, but I'm not wedded to that idea at all.
So I thought about that, I think, okay, as well, I kind of thought they're slightly different. One is like, can we fund this, right? So you're gonna have an increased budget cost, maybe not just, this year, but like in out years. And I feel like that's a different, it could be a different question than just a general cost benefit analysis. That's why I actually specifically broke that out, because I thought about that too. I'm like, yeah, can we put these together? I think they're slightly different, but I'd love to hear what other people think.
I have a question. Go ahead.
I wanted to just say, I think this is a great tool, but to the question of whether or not it should come before other commissions, I think that when a group such as the theater puts it together, that they are basically trying to cover in their own mind all the points that we may ask, but I think this kind of focuses on the important things that we need to know. And the same presentation that will be done to the Board of Finance will be done to us. So I think that having this in front of them is a valuable tool. I think that there's a couple more things that I would like to see added to it or adjusted, and we can talk about it offline.
Yeah, but and I want to go back to what you were saying, Tiger, because that you were saying that these are things that you baked into your into your evaluation or before you even bring it to us. Is there anything on this list that you think we're missing, or is this a good list? Do you think it's the right list? Looking at it,
well, I still can't find mine. Did you send it directly to everybody?
I did.
Oh, that's why I can't find it. Okay. Can you
It's on
forward
the
it?
tablet.
It's on, I know, not his, he doesn't.
I can forward it to him.
I'll just forward it to him.
I think I have the older, I think I have an older look at it. I mean, I have
It's
a piece of it.
It's different than the original one.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's different than the original one that was shared. But I mean, I feel like I don't want to wait right now.
No, but this is a working document, so you can send it to them later.
Yeah.
We're not voting on it right now.
Yeah, right. So I think I'll send it to you and then you can look at it because, that's great that you're considering all of these things and then we're all talking the same language. I think, making that more transparent to the folks that are bringing this to us would be really helpful. And, and you would maybe be able to answer the question.
There's almost two lanes of this type of capital industry. There's the private, like public-private stuff that comes to us, and then there's the town side of it, where, I mean, the town side of it should be pretty well, I mean, if anybody knows what we need to do, the town side of it is pretty well baked. I think this is like the perfect thing for a nonprofit or a private public to look at. How are you going to be judged from the beginning, going through this process? Here it is. Here's the roadmap to get this thing approved. And it almost seems like if you gave that to somebody early on, they could follow the roadmap, because everybody starts in this town. How do I get a playground through a couple moms get together and they decide, okay, how do I get this done?
Yeah.
I have no idea. They're starting with zero.
Right.
This at least gives them some sort of roadmap to say, you better check off all of these boxes.
Steve, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, Tiger, reviewing this and having been through at least one budgetary season with you and various aspects of the way you presented things, you cover 140% of what these questions are. I think this is a good roadmap or maybe not for what Tiger's been doing for 22.5 years. Rounding, but for someone that's presenting or wants something, that they're not just theory and how do we get this forward, and it comes through like, hey, does this meet like the appropriate, are the plans well vetted and thorough? I mean, Tiger, how many plans have you had approved that are vetted and thorough? I'd probably say a very high percentage, if not all of them, but maybe someone else says, what are the appropriate bodies that I need to go through? So I think this is a great roadmap for, and it arms people to then encourage them to present more and to give everyone and to use everyone's time efficiently.
So I agree, but I think it's also a way for us to talk about stuff. So if we ever do have to cut, right, you do want to compare and contrast. And so what you can say is, wow, well, this project has a lot more utility, because, you know, there's a lot more need for this. It's gonna affect a lot more people. So if we have to make tough decisions, it helps us also by, you know, making these our criteria. So it's also good for us to have a language and to, you know, compare and contrast the different projects as well. Because we may have, you know, an opportunity, or not an opportunity, but there may be a situation where we can't fund everything. And in that case, we are going to be comparing based on some type of criteria.
Well, that's why it's important to have a roadmap and where's the destination.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to pull this out and say, you know, you've arrived, okay,
Right.
here it is. Here's what we gave you at the beginning. Did you
Right.
get there? You know?
And there's no ambiguity as to why we're making the decisions. that we're
That's, I was gonna, I'm sorry, I was gonna say that my question was, when do you invoke this? Like, it's when you have to make a decision and you're making a cut, really, I mean. Right?
Or you're trying to justify it to somebody who wants to make a cut and say,
Right,
you know,
true, right.
you don't want this, Mike or Christina, or any, you know, but here's why I think this is a justifiable expense. You know, I think it needs this, I think it does this, I think it's a safety issue, and you can run through this, or you can say, I don't know why you're supporting this, it doesn't do any of these things, but we've sort of agreed upon a set of criteria that we think is important and is valuable.
Yeah.
I just want to say something, and not to criticize the Board of Finance or us or anything, but I have seen projects start out at the Board of Finance where they'll deny something, not understanding what the ramifications are for postponing that project. One of them was the roof at the high school. The immediate knee-jerk reaction was to say, no, we can delay it another year. Or it was the roof at Saks. And knowing what had happened at Westport with a roof, I brought it up at the meeting, and they decided that it was an emergency and issue and that they needed to fund it that year. But I think that some of us have experience that is not weighted the same way in the Board of Finance as different town council. For us to ask the question, I think it's imperative. Although we can't add to the budget, we can still have an effect on how the Board of Finance may look at something. Not often, but maybe once in a blue moon when it's needed.
Yeah.
So by the way, what Rich Townsend had done is he picked from a list of all capital projects, 7 that he thought were sort of in play.
Yeah.
That needed the most analysis, that weren't total consensus. And this would have been a perfect tool to say, okay, let's tackle those 7 and apply these criteria methodically in that conversation. I just want to make one thing clear to me, is that, and I'm a big admirer of this tool, I love it, and I plan to use it. But we're not asking the town in its capital proposals to do a report on each
No,
project
that's not mine.
to populate data. Okay,
No, I mean, that wasn't mine.
great. I just want to make that clear.
No, I mean, I didn't, I don't know if anyone else did, but that wasn't my intention.
So Tiger, you said as projects are evaluated by the various departments, and then have the departments develop a similar kind of structure that you're kind of having a little checklist of yes, this doesn't. So it's not really formalized, or is formalized?
Well, we have a formalized process, but a checklist like this, that these are inherent questions that we ask at our level, before it starts to launch. And then we have a process that we have to go through from a project management standpoint, as far as the boards and commissions that we've got to that we've got to touch and everything else that we have to do. So we have a formalized process there. These questions, excuse me, she summarized the majority of the questions that we already ask ourselves before we bring them to you, and then looking at it from a standpoint of, I have people bring me projects all the time from outside, I won't say outside the town, but from outside the town bodies, right? Or from outside our departments. And this would be helpful for them to understand what everyone will be looking for in the end, because really what it comes down to is I have to say to them, this is what they're looking for. This is what they're looking for. This is what they're looking for, right? So it's, it's several iterations. So being able to hand them a sheet of paper or several sheets of paper, however we want to shake it out, and say, this is a lot of the criteria that the council will be looking at, and, possibly other bodies, the Board of Finance and the selectmen as well. And these are the things that you got to touch base on before before she comes forward, is very helpful, in that regard, because she quantified out the questions that we pose to the app, to the other entities that come forward, whatever they might be. And it helps them, it's going to help us too. I'm not going to say it doesn't, because it's a check on what we're doing, to make sure that we're touching every base that you're concerned with as well. So, it's not that we won't be looking at it. We look at the majority of these, if not all of them, but, going forward, it'll be an easy way for us to go forward and say, yes, we've this project or this whatever we might be proposing touches that base, or it touches that base in this way, and then we have to explain how it touches that base, so I think it's helpful. It's just, excuse me, to let everybody know exactly what you're looking for. That way everyone's judged equally in the end,
So are there things on your list that are not on this?
I just sent it to you.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm looking at a former one. It's probably, 1 page long. Are there things on mine that are not on this? Ours are more,
The Tigers were organized them, and the average bear.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Tiger, sorry.
No, it's okay. There's so many echoes in that room, and I've got the inland wetlands in my ear, so because I'm trying to listen to inland wetlands, the application's there too, so it's a little hard.
Let me table this because it's still working.
Oh, you're on TV, though, you said.
I think we can get the feedback.
This was close to what I was looking at. And it's pretty much everything that we ask, if not more. And if there's something that is not on here that we ask ourselves, I could forward it to you and say, this is what we also ask ourselves. We get into a little bit more on constructability, time frame. We get into bandwidth, who can do it, who can't do it, those kind of things, as far as we're looking at when we put our budget forward as to what we can accomplish. Those are a little bit outside the realm, right, of this, because it's we want to make sure that we can accomplish everything that we're going to put forward. But if there's anything else, I'll ask my staff too to take a look and see if there's any other question that we ask ourselves. But we have a round table where we sit around and vet everybody's budget before it even comes to you several times. So but this is helpful.
Thanks, Tiger.
You're welcome.
And I kept you longer than you should, so.
Any thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at solely on the other side of the point, you're looking at finance side too, but I look at it going, it might be 17 million in front of you, that's obviously not what we're gonna expense in the book. So then it's taking what you had said in regards to what is the schedule of the drop off in the debt. I take that debt, and Tiger and I, this is our second year, we're trying to fine tune it to say, of the projects in the 5-year plan, what ones are the priorities, and when do we think we would actually bond? Outside of the whole authorization, when do we bond, and then drop it into those categories to say what year it hits, to say what does it affect to have the budget. So that's the schedule behind the scenes that both of us are trying to work on, to say, you may say, let's cut this project for 500,000, but if it's a 10-year project, you're cutting 50,000 out of the budget, well, out of the budget. What are the bigger ticket items that will have that impact on the budget? So that's what, with the 5-year plan right now, what the party's trying to figure out that schedule. So it's a little bit more meaningful for you to say, what effect does it have on the books?
Okay. And just before you go, one last thing about bonding. And one of the best meetings that we have ever is when we get the bond council here. And you or you haven't done this yet, I don't think, but we go through the debt that's rolling off. And you get this nice presentation, so we all sort of have that sense of where are we? Because we approve these budgets and we talk about numbers all the time, but the big picture where, you're talking about all that debt, here's where it was, here's coming down, now we've added the library. That bond presentation is really important to us, so
Okay.
I'd love to dive in there, it doesn't have to be, obviously, it doesn't have to be next month or two, but even if it was April or May,
In the meantime, I can give you the schedule I'm working with, it says this is our pure expense for the next
Yeah.
20 years.
Okay,
So at least you can see what I'm saying with those cliffs and the drop offs
yeah,
of when it's coming off.
really
Yeah,
helpful.
and
That
then
would be great.
I mean, 20 years is a long time out. I think every time we have some significant pay down, we replenish it with additional debt, which is common. But to know the next year or two, I think it's extremely helpful to help manage the process of what we'd like to reach, mapping the numbers to something like this and pairing the two together. I think it'd be extremely helpful.
And there's a correction on that, just because we are paying something down doesn't mean we replace it. We have actually been on a path to get down the amount of our indebtedness.
Oh,
So we are not.
Big numbers coming this year.
Yes.
The anticipation of, looking forward is what's coming down the pipe. But it's not that every year where something comes down, we put something back on. I mean, that's not been the mindset.
It's not a P times D, but it is a consideration that when things roll off, that we have put new things on, like the library, like the police station, like other things of that nature. So yes, while we're fiscally very conservative, which is amazing, it's the nature of the continuous improvements of parks and everything else. So when you're very conservative, fiscally conservative, and you have things pay off, you then entertain the option of adding new debt on.
Well, that's why the police station taken, I think, 15 years to get to the point where we finally are doing it, because they'd be right there, and then we said, well, we can't run a model. You can't run a model with that, then. We have a school.
Well, it's not that.
Can you put away the time cost?
Yeah.
Because I think it's costing us an extra 5 million, but yet.
I mean, so right now, we're paying about 17 million back a year in principal and interest, 17 million. In the next 3 to 4 years, probably 4 years, we'll be down to 8.
And that's the Board of Finance and Todd Lavieri, they talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
The last 4 or 5 years, I mean, they've had that hammer out, I mean, trying to get that,
Yes,
You know.
with the levels and the keeping it the 10% below, yeah. So it is dropping significantly.
all right, let's see, where are we?
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Item number 6, committee report, 10 of 8, does anyone have a strong? Do I have any? Okay, all right, so it's been committee reports for this evening, right? Yeah, it doesn't feel right to do it special. Right.
No,
That's not special.
We missed it at the last meeting because it was so late.
no, we postponed.
Postponed.
Yeah, we're gonna need, anyways, we're meeting again.
But I think we've. All the things that the committee. I mean, the police station, we had an update from last time, it's like, what do you say?
Again, enough said, so the 14th is next number. Right?
Yeah.
Is that what you like? One little amount. For, is this on behalf of, Chief John Federico with that update? There's, I didn't know this.
Spit it out, just spit it out.
Find it, the civilian police.
Oh, yeah. You did that before.
Yeah, okay, so
That's
that's really cool.
Great.
So has anyone done it or want to do it or gonna do it? Okay,
Yeah.
That's cool.
Great.
It's a great program.
That lets in some of the county and stuff.
Motion to adjourn.
Mark, all in favor, one about.
Schedule, right, you got the.
Guys,